A lot has changed since Iran last sat down with 6 negotiating powers in hopes of salvaging the 2015 nuclear deal. After a 5-month break, Iran has a new president, foreign policy team, and lead nuclear negotiator. And along with the new Iranian government's hardline image has come its heightened demands. Tehran has called for the immediate lifting of all sanctions that were imposed by the then Trump administration back in 2018.
In this round of negotiations, the main focus will be concentrated on the issue of sanction elimination.
Iran has also demanded guarantees that no future U.S. president will abandon the deal. Both were non-starters for Washington as talks resumed in Vienna. Under the 2015 agreement, Iran agreed to limit its nuclear activities and open up to inspectors in exchange for sanctions relief. But after the U.S. withdrew, Iran began enriching and stockpiling uranium past agreed-upon levels. Now the world powers are trying to revive the old deal, but with Washington and Tehran so far apart, many are doubting that a breakthrough will come anytime soon. And to discuss the latest round of nuclear talks, I'm joined from London by Abdel Bari Atwan. He is the editor-in-chief of Rai al Youm independent newspaper. And from New York, Mark Meirowitz. He is a professor at the State University of New York Maritime College. A warm welcome to you both. Abdel, negotiations have started after a 5-month pause. What has changed since then? What is the difference now?
Oh, the difference is huge. First, now we have a very radical Iranian president, not actually like Rouhani, who was considered a moderate. Second, I believe the Iranian now, as nearly a nuclear power, they managed to enrich a lot of uranium with about 60%. So they have a good quantity, which makes them on the edge of the nuclear power. They have the capabilities, they have the know-how. The third thing is, they managed to absorb most of the sanction, the American sanction on them. So they are in a very strong position now. They are saying, look, we are not going to talk about the nuclear program. We are in Vienna to talk about the sanction. The sanction should be lifted immediately, and we want guarantees that the coming American administration will respect any treatments, any agreements between us and the United States. We don't want Trump to withdraw from these kind of agreements.
So, Mark, what's your take on that? I mean, are there any prospects for a breakthrough in talks? Because it seems that Iran now has the upper hand in terms of sanctions. Could it be possible, just lifting sanctions?
I agree completely with my colleague's analysis of what's going on, but I'm going to go a little bit out of the box here. And I think, given the way in which Biden's foreign policy approached Afghanistan, which is basically to deal with weaker parties and to give in and capitulate as we pulled out our troops, I think on this one, Biden doesn't have very much room. He's going to need to make some sort of a deal, and probably it's going to be they're going to scale back something on their enrichment, and we're going to give some relief on sanctions. Something is going to happen here because I don't think Biden can afford a failure. Now, just the last point is that the Iran nuclear deal itself is completely flawed. It was flawed during Obama. It made no sense. It had no verification. And to prove that, the IAEA, which is the monitor, has been complaining about Iran's compliance, which has been basically shut down.
Yeah, Abdel, do you agree with Mark? And is finding a workable, let's say, agreement possible? I mean, could, for example, working on an interim agreement that would result in an easing of some sanctions and posing Iran's nuclear advances to buy time for a more comprehensive one in the future?
Yeah, I believe that Iranians are interested only in lifting the sanction completely. If the American, all the sanction, not just part of the sanction, so interim agreement couldn't be acceptable at all by the Iranian new leadership. They are saying clearly, if the sanction will be removed completely or no deal at all. So this is the accord which the Iranian believe it will work. So the Americans now are making a lot of concessions here. They are not talking about the Iranian, missile program, which was actually essential for the American, and but they are under Israeli pressure in this subject in particular. And also, they are not actually trying or accepting any pressure to change their regional power, their regional influence, supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon, supporting Ansar Allah in Yemen, supporting Hamas and Al-Jihad al-Islami in Gaza. So I believe the Iranians are very clear here. So they want a deal, which this deal could lift all the sanctions, shouldn't keep any sanction against the Iranian, or no deal at all. So I believe this round would be the last one.
So from the very beginning, Israel has opposed a possible deal between Iran and the Western world on its nuclear program. And Israel's current prime minister is continuing that policy. Let's hear what he said in the lead up to the Vienna talks, and we'll continue to talk.
Iran will be arriving at negotiations in Vienna with a clear goal: to end sanctions in exchange for almost nothing. Iran won't just keep its nuclear program. From today, they'll be getting paid for it.
So, Mark, what's your take on Israel's reaction to talks? Is Iran going to get paid for doing nothing?
Well, I mean, let's be realistic. Look, you know that Prime Minister Netanyahu presented evidence of the nuclear program that Iran was undertaking, even when it was agreeing not to do so. In other words, there's a question of credibility here, okay? And Iran's credibility, and that's why I mentioned the IAEA, which is really a very capable inspection program. They're not even cooperating with that. And they apparently had a nuclear program all along, even when they said they didn't. So I think that, but the problem here is for American foreign policy, which is really going to dictate this situation. I don't think the United States and President Biden wants to have another foreign policy failure. And he, I think, will capitulate to some extent. I don't agree with that. I think that my colleagues' points about the ballistic missiles and all the other things that Iran is involved in, those things aren't even being discussed here. We can't even get there. So I think right now, compliance for compliance, that is to say, lifting part of the sanctions in exchange for some compliance, is about the best thing that's going to be gotten here. Also, remember, it's not just the United States and Israel in the process. Of course, the Iranian general just recently said he was going to destroy Israel. I mean, which is not very helpful. But the point of the matter is, it's also the P4+1. It's the other great powers in Germany that are involved. And I'm sure they don't want to walk away from this. They want to walk away with something. I wanted to mention also that if you're going to do a deal based on the JCPOA, like, how is that going to work? Because that deal was negotiated a number of years ago, and it had a number of sunset provisions, which meant that the centrifuge restrictions, the enrichment restrictions were going to end after 10 or 15 years. So how are they going to fix that? So I think at the end of the day, they're going to do some sort of a fix here, because to walk away with no deal is really going to be very, very risky, very dangerous.
So, Abdel, what kind of assurances should Iran be given so that Biden's successor won't withdraw from the deal and reimpose sanctions as Trump did in May 2018?
Well, I believe, personally, I believe that the Iranians are right to ask for these guarantees, because they were bitten from the White House and bitten actually, and more sanction imposed on them. So they don't want to sign agreement now. And after years or 2.5 years, a new administration saying, no, we are not going to accept this deal again. So the Iranian will be in havoc, will be in a very bad situation. I think that the Iranians learned their lesson from the Trump administration, and that they are not going to fall in the same trap again. So maybe it is difficult for the for Biden administration to give them these guarantees, because there is nothing on the Constitution saying that this administration can actually decide for the coming administration. But the Iranian, as I said before, they are in a very strong position. They are making a lot of progress in their nuclear program. They have more than 30 kilograms of the highly enriched uranium. So I think at the end, they wouldn't accept any deal. They know the Americans are very weak now after the defeat in Afghanistan, and they believe that either a good deal or no deal at all.
So, Mark, what happens if no deal is reached and all sides walk away?
Well, I wanted to step back for a moment. The point about the administrations. I think the Iranians made a very foolish, ridiculous point where they said, like, oh, we want a deal that no president in the future can unwind. I mean, they wake up. This is the United States of America. If, however, the United States entered into a formal treaty, and that was a treaty binding agreement, and that would be much harder to unwind. But the fact of the matter is that I believe Iran is in a very weak position here and is exploiting American weakness. The sanctions were very successful. Trump's policy was very successful. He was on the brink of really, I think, getting some sort of a good deal, which would encompass some of the other factors as well. But American politics intervened, and Biden became president, and Biden campaigned on the point that he wanted to do a deal. He's been very, very clear on that, and also Blinken. Yes. I don't agree with it. I don't think there should be this kind of a deal.
Okay, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk.